Oh, today is going to be so much fun. We are diving into a post that Russell Moore wrote about his refusal to debate atheists. Now, your first impulse might be to say, and I couldn't blame you. But really, the post actually illustrates a weird concession that Russell Moore makes about the uselessness of apologetics. Hello, everyone, and welcome back. Today is Friday, June 19th, 2026. This is Roll to Disbelieve, and I'm Captain Cassidy. Thank you for joining me. I was so thrilled to see today's OP, and now to talk about it with you. Oh, I hope you enjoy it. This is why I like evangelicalism. They are so strangely hooked on having proof, yes, proof, for their claims. And yet they don't have any. They have none. None. So they're always spinning straw into gold. And I don't know about you, but I find it just fascinating to see that dichotomy working on the human mind. And when being dead wrong combines with complete arrogance, as we see in apologists, well, nothing but fun's going to result from that. And I have followed Russell Moore for long enough that he feels like an acquaintance. Like somebody you see on the bus every day on the way to work. He probably has no idea who I am, which is perfectly fine, but I sure know a lot about him. For example, he used to work for the Southern Baptist Convention. He led their Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission. But he was no old guard hardliner. Oh no. He was a member of the enemy faction, the Pretend Progressives. And during that time, he was probably the most ardent advocate of serious reform when the SBC's sex abuse crisis emerged in 2019. He was one of the first SBC leaders to actually platform and give an audience to sex abuse survivors and reformists. So for a while, it actually looked like the Pretend Progressives had a shot at making reform happen. But of course, the hardliners eventually won. They drove him out. But by the time he left, I think the Pretend Progressives were fed up with him too. None of them wanted reform either. But don't worry about him. He landed nice and soft at Christianity Today. That's one of the biggest evangelical sites and magazines out there. He's their editor-at-large now, and he often writes about the intersection of theology with everyday living and, of course, politics. But listen to me. Today's topic ran a bit long, so I'd probably better get started. But before we do that, I'd like to thank my patrons and supporters. My work is only possible thanks to that support. Thank you so much for everything you do. If you'd like to join them, I welcome your support as well. Please check out the end notes on today's write-up. It'll be at Patreon under Roll to Disbelieve, one word, or over at our official website, rolltodisbelieve.com. And thank you for whatever you decide to do. And now, our situation report. Russell Moore wants to hear about experiences and feelings, not arguments, in the theology section of Christianity Today. For the May and June issue of Christianity Today, Russell Moore, who as I mentioned is the editor-at-large there, wrote an intriguing post. He titled it, "Why I Don't Debate Atheists." The summary line is, "We need apologetics, but what we need more is genuine confidence in the word we carry." Capital W. He means generally his God, his religion, the Bible, everything. In his post, he makes a few important points. First, apologists don't tend to have converted because of apologetics. Instead, they convert for the same reasons pretty much everyone does in Christianity. They're raised in religious homes, or they had some emotional reason to convert. And in reality, this trend, which tracks really well with what I've seen, speaks to the uselessness of apologetics as a field. Second, Moore offers only straw man caricatures for Christians' targets. In fact, he kind of seems afraid of naming the real reasons why people don't believe Christian claims. He doesn't accurately describe the pushback. It ain't hard to think of reasons why, but we're getting there. Next, He says that not all Christians need to be able to win what he calls a cage fight against atheists. Of course, they should still totally learn apologetics. Gosh, who shouldn't? But what really matters is their feelings and their experiences. So they should push hard on acting really passionate about their beliefs. And lastly, in the end, what matters is thinking that heathens are afraid of the same things that Christians are, and that they're thinking things that Christians can easily deal with. He wants his readers to think that their evangelism targets only talk a big game, while they're hiding secret feelings of yearning and fear that evangelists can exploit. And amazingly, this post was categorized in the theology category on the site. Predictably, there is nothing theological about it. So now we're going to dive into his points, starting with a brief overview of apologetics itself. In Christianity, apologetics is a field that is concerned with finding philosophical arguments that might support the existence of Yahweh as a real omnimax God. Christians conceptualize apologetics as a sort of courtroom drama. Apologists are like the lawyers arguing for that existence. Officially, the goal of apologetics is usually to convert heathens to Christianity and to dispel doubts in currently believing Christians. In right-wing Christian flavors, and I mean like the hardline Catholics and the evangelicals, those sorts, followers are expected to learn the major apologetics arguments and to learn to counter objections to those claims. Evangelicals consider this process part of what they call equipping evangelists. Some apologists are actually professionals. They get paid to write books about their arguments and talk about them in seminars and that sort of thing. But most are amateurs of varying skill. Now, in the 2000s or so, new atheism arose. Some of those apologetics professionals made tours of the debate circuit. And there they argued with new atheist leaders and scientists about the existence of their God. I wrote about it a while ago. It was really a fun age. But that grand age of debates fizzled out around 2014 to 2015 after some very high-profile losses for the apologists involved. And since Russell Moore specifically praises William Lane Craig as a debater, I've got some videos linked that put the lie to that. Really, he was just really, really good at exploiting the rules of formal debate. That was it. He got his ass handed to him repeatedly by a physicist named Sean Carroll. It is a splendid showing, and I really recommend you take a look at it. Carroll has some magnificent observations about the universe and about our place within it. You know that line, they should have sent a poet? Carroll was who they sent, and it was beautiful. However, our friend Russell Moore does not like modern religious debates very much. And I can agree with him in sentiment, though not for the same reasons. In my opinion, religious debates are not how objective facts get uncovered. If anyone ever finds evidence to support the existence of any gods, it won't be an apologist, and it won't happen during a debate. Rather, debates reward people on either side who can just think very quickly on their feet. Their audiences value viral quotes and emotional appeal over genuine correctness. Nah, debates really work best when you've got two sides that are generally equally matched in terms of facts and support from reality, as we see in local politics sometimes, especially around budgeting. You've got two sides that have equally good claims to that money, and they each have to make their case. That's a pretty good way to use a debate. However, in an atheist-Christian debate, the two sides are not matched. One is based solely in reality, the other just isn't. No amount of wordplay will or can ever add up to a single tether to reality. Arguments aren't evidence. But that's not why Moore doesn't like debates. He just doesn't like seeing apologists arguing without fervor and passion. As Moore writes of good apologists, quote, "These apologists could not be replaced by artificially intelligent debate bots," unquote. And he's not wrong. Many times I have compared apologists to old school Roomba vacuums. They would just hit a wall, and they would just keep hitting that wall repeatedly, and they couldn't adjust course. They would just back up a bit and then slam into the wall again. Bunk, 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 over and over. And that's because apologetics largely only works, and to the extent that it can, if the target follows the script that the apologist is working off of. And that's why it's fun not to work with it. Despite that core failure, as Christianity declines more and more in the United States, apologetics has boomed. There are now countless books, videos, and social media posts that push apologetics arguments at customers and followers alike. And in addition to that, countless other Christian leaders who might not be professional apologists themselves, they still talk up apologetics as an essential skill for Christians. In telling us that apologists themselves didn't convert through apologetics, though, Moore insists that he is way more impressed by their testimonies than he would have been if they'd been, quote, convinced by the cosmological argument for the existence of God, unquote. And if you're wondering, the cosmological argument runs like this. The universe exists. Well, it couldn't possibly have created itself. That's crazy talk. Therefore, something or someone must have created it. Therefore, Jesus. It is not in the least persuasive. Anybody who learns to spot logical fallacies, cognitive biases, and simple brute force manipulation attempts is gonna see right through even venerable old apologetics routines like this one. And yeah, it's been around for centuries, and it's never gotten better. Modern apologists keep trying to tweak it, but so far they haven't found a way to square the circle that it creates. And that brings us to a very big deal breaker, and it's one that Russell Moore can only hint at. Even if apologetics routines were valid, even if their structure were airtight, the very best that they can ever do is make Christianity seem a bit more credible. That's it. And maybe that's why any Christian engaging too critically with apologetics runs the risk of incurring serious doubts about their faith. I have heard apologetics come up in way too many extimonies about deconversion to think otherwise. But Moore can't come out and say that, of course. He can't. So instead, he pulls off an interesting sleight of hand. He laces his post with support for apologetics. This was amazing. See if you can spot it. Quote, Christians sometimes think the way to share the gospel is to have a ready answer for every possible objection to belief, from archaeology to quantum theory. The church needs people who can do all that. We need debaters, yes, and we need experts, unquote. In the post, we see a lot of this kind of yes, but argumentation style. Yes, Christianity needs apologists. Given, we all think that. Okay. But it also needs people who can speak passionately about their experiences and feelings. It's like he's trying to soothe ruffled feathers to avoid provoking the wrath of all those Christians who think that apologetics is their highest calling. And I can't blame him there either, because I've seen what happens to Christians who are too blunt about apologetics being so goddamn useless. Back in the 2010s, I looked at the case of Myron Penner. He wrote a book called The End of Apologetics, and the tribe did not like that very much. The main thrust of Russell Moore's post is a pivot to experiences and feelings over arguments. Instead of fancy verbal footwork, they should instead focus on their experiences and feelings. He thinks they should cultivate, that's the word he uses, Christian ideals like holiness, gentleness, and respectfulness, alongside, quote, the hope that is within them, unquote. I'm guessing that means heaven. To demonstrate how powerful his approach can be, he reaches for the New Testament's accounts of early evangelists, like Paul. This is a common trope within Christianity. They're all really hooked on original Christians. They think that in the first century, the earliest Christians did everything right. They don't really know much about the early history of their religion, do they? I mean, I didn't. When I was Christian, I thought the same way. And let's face it, Russell Moore pushing evangelicals to talk more about experiences and feelings, that's not unusual either in that end of Christianity. It's just a strange pivot from somebody who ostensibly thinks that the Bible is absolutely literally true and completely inerrant. As Moore writes, quote, "Evidence may lead people to a moment when, in seeing Jesus, they have faith. But faith is not the end point of an accumulation of evidence. Faith is the evidence. People must experience it from the inside to really know it." Unquote. If you're exploding right now, it's okay, I did too. Because faith isn't evidence. It's a feeling. If I have faith that the grocery store closes at 9 p.m., that's not evidence supporting the claim that it closes at 9 p.m. It's what happens after I've encountered what I believe to be evidence for the claim. Of course, I could be wrong. I may have based my faith on faulty evidence. Maybe I've only heard someone say that's the closing time. Maybe I'm misremembering something. Maybe I'm mixing this store up with another. You never know. Faith can be misplaced. It can be wrong. In similar fashion, billions of non-Christians around the world are just as certain of their religious beliefs as Moore is of his. And all these groups are saying very different things about some stuff. They can't all be right, but they can all be wrong. The other problem, of course, is that if people can't have certainty without going gung-ho into his religion, then Russell Moore is implicitly admitting that he has zero objective evidence for his claims. Like, look, I'm not a jogger, but I have evidence-backed faith that the practice has huge health benefits for those who do it. And even without physically going to the state of Wyoming, I'm pretty sure Wyoming exists. I mean, maybe. Probably it exists. All that said, Russell Moore is just as guilty of wanting bedrock certainty in his beliefs as any brigade of evangelicals online. He wants his readers to stop thinking of their God as an algebra equation. That made me laugh. Oh, he just wishes. He wishes that his God's existence could be that simple, that stark, that real. But it isn't. No math describes anything he believes about the supernatural. The problem is, we've been blessed, Squeaky wants in. The problem is, especially for right-wing Christians like himself, they want a real-life God who does real-life things in the real-life universe. But nothing about our universe lends any support to that notion. And apologetics is the dead opposite of algebra equations anyway. It's what Christians reach for because they don't have algebra equations, or carbon-14 dating, or archaeological finds, or extant writings from that critical 0 to 35 CE time frame, or evolutionary biology support, or a single verified miracle as supernatural in nature, or maybe even a decent study marking the high efficacy of intercessory prayer. Man, if Christians had a single bit of that, they would drop the apologetics in the dust where it belongs. Maybe because Moore knows he doesn't have any of that, he builds straw men that are much easier to demolish. He writes, quote, "When someone says we can't trust the Gospels because they were written hundreds of years after Jesus lived, we should show them why that's not true." Unquote. And okay, first of all, no one thinks they were written hundreds of years after Jesus lived. Experts date the first fragments of Mark, which are the earliest ones we have, to about the 60s, maybe 70s CE. That's Common Era. Likewise, they think John probably comes from the beginning of the 2nd century, so like 100, maybe even to the 140s, but probably closer to 100 to 110 CE. So maybe a century tops after Jesus' supposed lifetime? If you would give a millennial side-eye for trying to write a contemporary account of the Victorian age, then there's even less reason for you to trust the Gospels. But that's not even why people don't really trust the Gospels. We don't trust the Gospels because nothing supernatural in them, right down to the existence of Jesus, his family, his followers, and anything he said or did, appears anywhere in any extra-biblical writings from that critical 0 to 35 CE time. And we know this because over here at Roll to Disbelieve, we did the math. We did a whole series about this, First Century Fridays. Link in the write-up, of course. Even real people and supposedly real events don't work in reality the way the Gospels describe. Like Pontius Pilate, who supposedly condemned Jesus to crucifixion, he acts completely, wildly even, out of character from how contemporary people described him. He did not like Judea. He did not like Judeans. He was hugely unlikely to have given them fuck all anything. Russell Moore offers another straw man argument. This time, it's about the people who, correctly, insist that everything is actually based in reality, not in anything supernatural. He writes, quote, "When someone says everything is material, we ought to show them how they don't really act, as though love and courage and music and beauty are just chemical secretions." Unquote. Okay, fine. Give us evidence otherwise. Antidepressants, party drugs, pot, they work because emotions are chemical reactions. Music affects us because it toys with our brain wiring. It can even foster altered states. And not to put too fine a point on it, but Russell Moore should know that because in 2023, Christianity Today ran an article about just that. Even animals demonstrate enormous courage, even snakes. So it's not divine in nature, it's not even uniquely human. And that is before we get into the rushes of neurochemicals, the interplay of brain structures that produce all of it. Like beauty. Beauty is pretty damn universal. Think in terms of face symmetry. We like our faces symmetrical. Not too symmetrical, but pretty symmetrical. Or the golden spiral in art. That's that seashell-looking shape that you see show up with the golden ratio. I have an example linked in the write-up of a comic book page from JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. The artist uses this golden ratio all the time. The fact that all of this stuff is based in reality, none of it makes emotions, music, courage, beauty, art any less compelling, any less amazing. They don't need to be caused by invisible sky wizards. And do not think for a moment that I didn't notice that Moore doesn't even try to make his own conditioned neurochemical responses to his religion sound more objectively real. He's just trying to knock down our whole mechanism for figuring out what's real and what isn't. Like the scientific method. People who believe the Bible is literally true and that there is a genuine supernatural realm full of beings in it, they don't like the scientific method. It doesn't play with them. So they have to do this stupid game of last ideology standing to knock down our approach to fact-finding so that we might be a bit more inclined to use his. He can't make a case for using his mechanism until we lose trust in ours. God, it is such intellectual cowardice. But he's about to top himself. So far, Russell Moore has not written a single word in his career, but especially here, that's made his claims sound even slightly more credible. To hear him talking, or writing I suppose in this case, one could be forgiven for thinking that evangelism really only works if the target is softened up by Christian upbringing, or is in a state of emotional vulnerability. That doesn't exactly scream, my beliefs are based in reality, does it? But then we notice Moore's deep contempt for the people rejecting his claims. It's subtle, but once you start learning to notice it, you're not going to unnotice it. Here's what he writes. Quote, "When these forums," he means debate stages, "seem to burn with life-changing fervor, it is not when the Christians applaud loudly and the skeptics slink away having been owned." And another, we face an opportunity when people all around us are exhausted by living like machines. Many of them will keep their guard up and argue confidently, but deep down they wonder, what if there is more than this? What if behind all this, there really is someone who knows and loves me? And the third, the word, capital W again, the word we carry is resilient and can handle whatever the next decade throws at it. That's not because our opponents are stupid, but because the gospel is true. Unquote. Oh, really? Is it? Okay. And are these debates such grand victories as he claims? Are skeptics slinking away all owned? No, they're not. He doesn't even mention the times that Christians got completely blown the fuck out by atheists in debates. Particularly once heathens began figuring out just how Christians were manipulating formal debate rules to win, those Christians began to lose. And I've got links in the write-up, by the way, of two that I really, really like. One's from 2009, Christopher Hitchens and Stephen Fry versus two literal who Catholics arguing about whether or not the Catholic Church is a force for good. And there was a fun one from 2014 between Ken Ham, major creationist, and Bill Nye, the science guy, about creationism, of course. That one was nicknamed Ham on Nye. It was a big deal back at the time. Further, it's insulting that Moore wants to assume that deep down they wonder. It's a common belief within Christianity. Apologists especially push the idea that whenever someone rejects a recruitment pitch, it's never for the reasons given. It's always something else. And if evangelists can just figure out what's really going on, they can fix it. And they'll win that person to faith, or back to faith if they're an apostate. In the infamous 2014 evangelical movie God's Not Dead, this idea becomes a plot point. The evil atheist professor, Radisson, has official, stated reasons for rejecting Christianity. But really, he's just really pissed off that Jesus didn't magically heal his dying mother when he was a little boy. And the hero of the movie, a student in one of his classes, picks and picks and picks at Radisson to figure out what's really going on, and Radisson just finally explodes at him with the grand reveal. There is no way whatsoever that an evangelical thinking this way can engage honestly and meaningfully with non-believers. It is the ultimate bad faith position to hold. But I guess it's easier to assume that one's opponents are dishonest liars hiding yearnings for belief than it is to understand that people rejecting Christianity have very good reasons to do so. To Christians like Russell Moore, serenely satisfied that his feelings are facts and his faith is evidence, it is impossible for anyone to reject his religion for anything but stupid reasons. And, really, I understand. No good salesman can accept a no. They've always got to treat it like, not right now, but maybe later. And there isn't much more that's more hard sales than Christian evangelism, which demands that targets change their whole worldview, their whole ideology, to match those of the evangelist. Or else. And I loved how John Shore put it in 2015. He's a Christian. He called that mindset, I love you, now change. And that's about how it works. There is nothing respectful, gentle, or even holy about those kinds of demands, to quote Russell Moore's very own 3 stated ideals. There never has been. In particular, love is incompatible with the power plays that are inherent in evangelism demands. Russell Moore's post may upset some hardliners in evangelicalism. If they see it, they largely ignore him these days. But he's not writing for them, and he's especially not writing for heathens. He wants to give Christians, like himself, more serene satisfaction that their feelings are facts, and their faith is evidence. In this era of great decline, that will need to be enough to keep the butts in pews for, just a bit longer. In the end, it's really a moot point, isn't it, that Russell Moore doesn't want to debate atheists. Who cares? Really, he should be a lot more concerned that more and more people, not just atheists, but a grand swath of people, find his product irrelevant to their lives. whether it's sold via debates, keyboard fights, or soft shoe apologetics routines. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed that. I know I sure did. I just love those blasts from the past. Next up, we're going to take a look at personal evangelism. We've talked about it off and on over the years, but I want to dive into how it works and why it works. Because if what is old is new again, we're going to be hearing more of that from the keyboard warriors. Until then, this is Captain Cassidy signing off. Hope you all have a great weekend. Stay cool, everybody, and we'll see you soon.